Hey everyone, Sakurayasin here, and welcome to another episode of Pointy Chins, where I take you through my art journey. Alright, so I feel like this is a bit of a better month, especially than the last few ones. I'm kind of trying to simplify shapes and work in more, I suppose, bigger shapes. So in this case, I'm simplifying the head. I don't know if you can see it, but there's the original drawing is like goes around here. It doesn't have the hair part yet. It just goes around and then it comes back. And I found working with that shape made it a lot easier to have an appealing design. And it seems the more I break from that, the worse it gets. So that's something I guess I wasn't entirely sure of at first, which is why you can see guys like this who aren't really, they don't have that flow to them. See how it kind of encompasses the whole head and it connects with the neck very well. In this case, it's got the idea, but it's not one, or not one line, but it's not like a fluid line. It's not energetic, and so it doesn't feel as energetic. So yeah, in this case, it's a bit too broken, but you know, in some cases where I am implementing it, it is working, and in the cases where I'm not really implementing it, it's not working. Here, like with guys like this, you know, just trying to get the head in and the sort of the body into one rhythm so it feels larger. And there's parts of this that aren't working, but parts of it that are kind of working. And then here, I guess I was just extending the neck. But I would say this one doesn't work because these shapes in the body are conflicting with this. Like, you've got this super long neck, but it doesn't flow well into the body at all. And that's a problem I have quite a bit. But, you know, hopefully it gets better. This guy's pretty good because he's sort of contained within a larger shape that's quite boxy, and then kind of fits within that, and it's working, I feel. Whereas this one is and then these ones aren't really working. I was trying to go for a big gesture, and so she does have gesture to her, and I mean all of the ones here kind of have gesture, but not so much cohesion. The things still don't really feel like they're working together. The head doesn't quite match the body. Things like that. So, whatever, you know, just keep on experimenting. With this one, again, it's the body is too different in the way it's handled to the head for this lady. So the head ends up looking like one style, the neck looks like a different style, and then the body looks like it's got like 3 different styles inside one, which isn't good. But some of the others are better. I think this one's not good, but it's a bit better in terms of shapes. But in terms of detail, the detail is too much. And then this arm definitely doesn't match the same effect as this. So not a lot of matching. I'm liking this proportion. And this guy's kind of funny. Alright. So here I was thinking, like, well, what about different body sizes? Like a more chibi look, I guess. And can't say this one worked at all. Here I wanted more of a stretch thing, but again, it's pretty tricky to get, or at least it was for me, to get it all working. I don't think it did quite, although, again, the gesture's okay. Yeah, this one, like, the neck's a bit big. The body's not quite working with it. This one feels very stiff. So I guess this, you know, had a better day and then I had a worse day. This would definitely be a worse day. And I suppose these two express that feeling of, you know, things aren't quite good here. Alright, so bringing back the water brush. I like some of these little doodles. They're just, again, continuous line. I suppose the style is, or the few things I do are kind of becoming more consistent. I tend to have these types of little doodles, these more cartoony ones, and then maybe some less cartoony ones. I think the amount of shading on this is a bit much. It's not quite working well. But it does have this strong, brutish quality to it. Chunky, I suppose, is a better word. So that's good, that there is some of that. In this case, it looks like another bad day. So it went like, what, good, bad. And yeah, I don't know what's going on with this person. But this one's kind of working. Again, I'm building on an oval, and I mentioned that in a few videos, where whenever I build off like this tilted oval or ellipse, I don't know how you want to call it, but it has a lot of energy and dynamism to it, as opposed to something more like this, which is, I mean, it's still an oval. Even this one's an oval, but it's a bit rounder. I probably did this one first and then tried to do a more exaggerated, pushed version beside it, and that's always a good thing to, you know, if you draw one thing and you're not quite feeling it, try to do the same drawing beside it and fix the mistakes. At least in a sketchbook, I think it works. This guy stood out to me. Some dog creature. I don't know. Some tentacle people. This guy's okay. I don't know why I was drawing more dog people. But I guess that was a day for a couple of dog people. Here, this is not really a... Like, this kind of looks like a comic, but it's not really. I was just trying to think of panels with text. So, just the composition, arranging the composition so there is placement for the text. So I feel like if I didn't have this text bubble here, it would feel a bit empty in this area. So it's designed for text bubbles, I guess. So yeah, I mean, they're not real scenes or anything. It's not really well thought through. It's just, okay, have a person talking, have another person talking, and then where do you leave the room? Where's the positive and negative space? I kind of like this one with the candle, and I imagine if this was painted, you would get this warm candlelight on her, and then maybe the other side would be in shadow, probably like oranges, and then a dark teal for the background, perhaps, would look okay. So more framing. I figured that it's probably good to practice just having things contained within a frame. It's always good good form for trying to work on your compositions, and to think of the frame as part of the image. And I think that's super important. Rather than thinking of the page that you're working on as sort of the border of where you can draw, think of it as a frame, or maybe the outside edge of a camera. That's very important. It's not just a container for a drawing, but rather it's part of the composition. But having said that, I can't say I like any of these too much. And this one's okay, but it feels like he's gonna fall over. Yeah, I don't know. Not really feeling any of them. I guess that's why these people exist, to state that, yes, I do not like this. I'm not quite pleased. Okay, so more framing, more composition. Yeah. And then working on like fatter body types, but I feel they're too top heavy. I've been struggling with having the legs of bigger body types be too long, because it looks weird when they are. And I would notice in cartoons, especially Western cartoons, they tend to give fat people like really stubby little legs, like super short. And I was sort of thinking about, well, people don't really look like that. I mean, if a person is, let's say they're skinny and they're a certain body type, and then they just get really, really, really fat, they're still going to be the same height. Their legs aren't going to shrink. It's not like their torso is going to be much bigger than their legs. And so I was trying to draw, I suppose, more accurately, but it didn't quite work. And when I would make fat people with much shorter legs, it looked better. And I think it's to do with just the way you exaggerate. And if you're gonna, for instance, if you want to show that something is very big up top, making the legs smaller and maybe even fitting it in a more boxy or round shape is going to feel a lot fatter than a very tall rectangular shape, for instance. So more compositions. Here I was thinking of like a little girl at a sweet shop. These are cakes. That's an eclair. That's a cupcake. There were a lot of these bakeries in Romania that had certain things like this, and I guess I was just missing that. And yeah, just like, I don't know if you can see the hand here, but it's supposed to be one of those super stretched anime compositions where the person's like rushing towards the screen and their head's all big and the body's all small. But in this case, I didn't make the body small enough, so it just looked silly. It didn't quite work. That the hand is too small compared to how much distortion is necessary. You actually need crazy amounts of distortion, like where the head's many times bigger than the body, or at least how it looks, for it to read as that perspective. Here it's just some targeting thing of somebody, I guess. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Maybe some kind of amphitheater or something, and this person is on a balcony or some kind of raised, elevated platform looking down at the proceedings. And then just some faces. I find that using this kind of, you have like a taller vertical rectangle shape, and then you have a diagonal, not quite 45 degree, but maybe close to that. Seems to work in terms of compositions when you have these portraits, because it gives it this look like the person is sort of looking at you, or it just feels a lot more dynamic, as opposed to just having like a composition, maybe even more of a squared rectangle, and then having a straight up and down, maybe something a bit, I mean, that's still quite vertical, but yeah, I mean, you get the idea, right? Like, it gets quite boring when they are in the same tilt as the frame. Like, this is a bit more, I guess, what I'm talking about, you know, pretty square. It would be even worse if he was like just straight ahead, looking straight ahead, like his head was facing forward. Everything is just in one plane. That would be pretty boring. So just tilting them a bit can be quite effective. So here is really where, I mean, on the first page I was talking about containing shapes, and this is really an example of that. And I think this is working. This is kind of the base I start with. A lot of the drawings start with a very loose base like this, and then I draw on top of it. So here's a masculine character. I have the head going into the neck, which flows into the shoulder, goes down the arm, and then you have this rhythm that goes from the torso straight into the leg. I feel like that works pretty nicely. And then trying to do a female character with a similar thing, just containing all the shapes. In this case, I gave like shorter, stubbier legs, but the arms aren't really working with the body. Like, these shapes do not go together. They're just combined shapes, but without a a thought about, what does what is this shape? It's pretty fat at the top, tall and narrow, or fat at the bottom, fat and wide, and then tall and narrow. And then it doesn't quite work. You've got these super skinny long arms instead of something a bit more short and maybe long but then fat. Something like that would have worked better, I think. This one is okay. It's a matter of practicing, so this is obviously not very good looking, but it's a start, I feel. And even the stuff I'm doing now, I would say like, oh, this is sort of where a lot of the breakthroughs happened. And I suppose they don't necessarily, like the little breakthroughs you have don't necessarily appear all at once. It's not like this one eureka moment where, oh, suddenly I figured it all out and now I'm good. It's more a bunch of little battles that you fight. And some of them, you learn something and then you forget it later, and then you have to relearn it over and over again throughout a period. But each time you relearn that lesson, for instance, in this case, starting with a very circly head, which is not what I do, I learned, no, it's better start with this like diagonal oval shape. So in this case, I have that, but it's like, okay, you kind of forget, and then each time you relearn it, it gets reinforced, and eventually, over lots of practice, it sticks. And when it sticks, that's when things look consistent. But when you're still in your ugly duckling stage, it can be very discouraging, and you kind of fluctuate. You go up and down. Like, look at this one, like totally not matching any of this cohesion thing. It's trying to be perspective-y, but you got this tiny simplified head on this overly complicated body that's not, it's none of the shapes are working. There's no good flow here. Even these ones are better. But it's still a struggle. So I guess my point is, if you are struggling, if you are in that ugly duckling stage and you feel like you keep going up and down, don't despair, because eventually you figure it out, and the good things stick around. Like the important lessons that you learn, you'll end up relearning them, and the mistakes over time will diminish. Maybe not right away though, and certainly not as soon as you might like. Especially for me, I feel like, God damn it, I'm still making the same stupid mistakes. I'm still making ugly drawings. Sometimes it just feels like I can't do it. I don't know how this works. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Or it's almost random. Like, oh, this picture looks good and this one looks bad, and I don't know why. And I can't replicate it, for instance, on this page. This guy looks good, and he's got this like diagonal stretch push thing, and I like the torso, and I think that's cool. And then this guy's like not at all. It just doesn't work. Now I could describe it a bit better why, but not fully. I still don't completely get why this one works much better than this. But looking at it, I do know that, and I figure eventually one day I will understand. So I guess it's a bit of faith and a lot of mileage. I suppose that's the recipe. You just got to keep working at it and trust that it will stick. So here, I tried something quite different with just making lines. Like, I'm not thinking in terms of really a drawing. I was thinking more about whether you could paint with pen. And of course I believe you can, because I've seen people do very intricate pen drawings that feel like just as rich as a painting, but it's done all with pen. So, I can't say it's a success. In fact, I don't think it is, but it's something. I kind of like the proportions on this guy. This one, not so much. I feel like the features are a bit too central in the face when you look at the head from top to bottom. And it's weird because when you learn how to draw faces, everything is about measurements and guidelines and putting the eyes halfway down the face and stuff like that. But then when you learn to exaggerate or simplify or stylize, so much of that has to go out the window. In fact, you don't want to be doing that. You don't want to put the eyes just halfway down because that looks boring. You lose character that way and you just end up with this very generic thing that's not that appealing. And it's the same with things like symmetry, where when you're starting out, you might spend a lot of time trying to make sure, you know, like one eye is the same size as the other. And then later on, what you realize is, yeah, but that doesn't look good when you do that. It looks boring. And when you have one eye that's, you know, the sizes are different, either because it's distorted in perspective or whatever else, it can look more interesting. So, but I guess that's kind of the learn the rules and then break them thing. Because, yeah, you gotta learn it all first. And then, okay, fine, this is how to make someone who looks normal, and then proceed to break them. But I mean, I'm still on the fence. I don't know exactly if it's entirely necessary to learn the rules and then break them, or if you can sort of just learn your own broken rules and do it enough that you just get appealing things and it doesn't really matter. I suppose it really depends on where you're going, what you want to do with your career, but I do feel like it is a lot more empowering when you can, when you do know the rules and you can kind of bend them however you want them. So here, I think this proportion's working a bit better. The head's a bit smaller, but you've got this nice flow. See, from the head right into the shoulder, it's got this diagonal, which is replicated in this shirt thing, which isn't quite in this one, for instance. This one's, you got this, like, you go down, and then almost at a 90-degree angle, you have the shoulders, whereas here they're kind of sloped. Like, there's kind of a slope from the trapezius into the shoulder, which I think works better. I don't know if I'm just saying, I like this person, kind of. I don't know if I'm just saying, like, stuff that doesn't really mean anything to the people watching. I don't know. You feel free to leave a comment if any of this makes sense to you, or if I'm just saying stuff that I feel like, oh, this is important. That's really good. Keep that in mind. And meanwhile, people are like, what are you talking about? Okay, so this one, I would say, is terrible. It's trying to be all perspective-y. And when I think this way, like when I focus on perspective, and maybe you're the same way, things get super stiff. And this is really, I think it's common, you know, for you to be considering perspective and your images get stiff. What I've learned to do, rather than focus so much on getting the boxes down and things like that, is more think in terms of a general large shape. As if you were looking at someone and that person is really far away from you and you just see their silhouette. I guess it's about trusting that you know what it looks like already, and then getting the big shape. And if you get the big shape, like, don't put any details. Don't put all the, oh, here's the eye and whatever, or here's the wrinkle in the fabric. Nothing like that. Just get the big shape down, get a sense of it, and then look at it and try and figure out, well, if this person was standing around this area, what would the ground be like? What would the ground plane, where would things be in relation to this person? Almost like you're imagining it. I have trouble visualizing, but I try and look at the page and just, where would it be if I was going to put it here? For instance, let's just say this woman was in a background. So I've got the woman down. Now, if I was thinking about the background, I would say the horizon isn't going to be up here. It's not going to be super high, because that would imply, if the horizon is up here, that we're kind of looking down on her, which isn't the case. We're kind of looking up at her, right? So the horizon's probably going to be lower, probably around here or here. Feels like okay. Like between any of this area, feels like it could work. It just kind of changes her height. You know, if it's down here, she looks really tall. If it's up here, she doesn't look as tall. but within this area, it's still okay. So that's kind of the thing, is to trust that, okay, I can maybe not get it perfect, but I can get it to a believable point. And so by working on the bigger shapes and then like the big picture and then breaking it down into the specific technical aspects of, okay, fine, the shape looks nice, but the anatomy wouldn't actually work this way. Well, you don't necessarily break the anatomy to fit the shape. You still include the correct anatomy as best as you can, but you're going more with the shape than you would if you weren't considering the shape to begin with. And so I guess that's the trade-off. When you start something like perspective and you start very stiff with a lot of grids, there is a much higher chance that because you started stiff, you're going to continue stiff in your drawings. They started with very little energy, and they will continue and end with very little energy. Whereas if you start with a lot of energy, even if you don't necessarily stick to the original guides that you made for yourself, you'll continue with a lot of energy. And this page sucks. Both of these pages, except this guy. I like this kid. He looks good. He looks funny. His head is a basic pentagon, I guess, shape. I mean, there's a little... Could be a hexagon if you include the chin, but basically it's like a pentagon with circle for ears. This lady seems not bad either, although, I don't know, maybe the ears... Like, the side of the head seems a bit cut off. Like, there's not... she's missing stuff. She's not quite there. And this guy, I kind of like his face, but I don't know, the body is not working at all. These people, the heads aren't attaching to the bodies well. This person, the eyes are way too close to the top of the head, so it's creating this weird distortion. The struggle. It is struggle, man, I tell you. Here, I guess I was just thinking of, well, let's do compositions, because, you know, graphic design and practice that. I guess it's just a day where I was feeling lost and not really sure what to draw and just doing whatever. So it went through a bunch of different things. This one is probably the best on the page, and it's just a scribble, and I think the torso's too short, but I mean, these are just things that, yeah, it might not be good, but whatever, it adds to mileage. Trying to make like a skirt that's blowing in the wind, I guess, here. Playing with extreme forced perspective. You got this kind of curve going through the body, and that creates this dynamic look. But if you notice like how close the head is, like here's the top of the head, here's the bottom of the feet. They're really, if this person was standing, it wouldn't even be like belly button. It would probably be around like nipple height is where her feet are, which, you know, but you have to keep that in mind when you're doing perspective, just how distorted things can get. It's a pretty good idea to look at forced perspective photography or things like that and just observe, or even look in the mirror. It's pretty easy to hold your hand out, and I mean, if you have a mirror that's pretty far away from you, you can stand far away from your mirror and see just how, okay, hold your hand out, see how small your hand is in relation to your body or your head. Probably your head is a better measure, and then move closer and closer to the mirror and look how big your hand gets in relation to your head. It's good to kind of, I feel like it's good anyway to build up this type of sense of things. Like, oh, when it's this forced, things can be this big. I mean, here's kind of an idea of, the ratio's still not good enough, but like, oh, the head's this big, the hand is coming towards you, and it's much bigger than you might think, but it's still, I don't think it's big enough. But just get those senses developed. Here's a cool person. I guess this one, I tried to create this shape for the body, and for the most part, the head kind of flows, maybe not perfect, but at least like this pants area kind of flows, but I didn't know what to do with the arms. I didn't know how to connect them. I didn't know how to continue that flow. This one, this page is just, I don't know. Again, like this drawing, if I had done this when I was 13 or 12, maybe I think it's okay, but at this point, it seems very out of place. Yep. So, continuing on, I was just thinking of composition here where you have the frame and then you have her in a triangle. So it's kind of a rectangle, a triangle, and then I wanted to put a shape in the background to complement it, and I couldn't think of one. Eventually, I just put in this tilted rectangle that's sort of going out the page. I don't think it's great. I'm not sure, you know, what the right decision here would have been, but yeah, just it's an attempt, you know. I mean, the thing is, you can't be afraid of making attempts in art because you're not, like, art is super easy. You're not doing surgery where, oh, I'm gonna experiment and maybe the patient's gonna die, but maybe they won't. Maybe this will turn out well. Well, that's very risky, but in this case, it's not. It doesn't matter. It's just drawing. I mean, the worst thing that happens is you wreck a drawing that might have been a good drawing, but if you're trying to become an artist anyway, you got to know that you're gonna do thousands, maybe millions, who knows, of drawings, and so this is just a drop in the bucket. It's not. There's no image that you do that should really be so important or so precious, and that's not. It's not true that that's exactly the case, because I mean, I feel anyway that certain images do have more importance than others, but it's more the thought that, especially if you're doing something kind of like a study, something like these types of things where it's just, oh, just draw a person. There's no need to get precious over any of these things. There really should be this feeling like, well, I'm just going to draw another one, and none of these are as good as what I'll be doing in the future anyway, so there's no cause for fear, really, in art, although I'm not gonna lie, because, I mean, I do understand why there would be. I certainly did feel that way at times, and I think most of it has to do with mileage and just the amount of drawings you do, because if you've only, let's say you've only done 10 drawings and one of them is good, that's important. That one drawing gets 1 out of 10. You've only done 10 drawings, but, you know, that 1 out of 10, that one seems significant. But if you've done 1,000 drawings and 100 of them are good, individually, I mean, the ratio is still the same, it's 1 out of 10, but individually those 100 drawings don't have the same significance as that one drawing. So that's why it's really important to do a lot of stuff. If you have one painting or one drawing that looks good, I feel, and I tried to do this as well, although not successfully all the time, but I tried to immediately go on to the next one. Like, don't dwell on it. Don't stick around too long, because what'll happen if you do that is you tend to build up this maybe a fear of not being able to do as good as you did instead of it not mattering, because it doesn't matter. It's like, whatever, you did a drawing. It might be good, it might be bad. Who cares? Just move on. Keep learning, keep growing, keep trying to do more. And then other people can decide, you know, whether this is a good one or a bad one. But I don't think it's necessarily important to focus on, you know, that. And especially these days where everything seems to be catered towards creating a product, and something it's not finished unless it's on Instagram and you've got a bunch of comments or something like that. I don't know. I don't use Instagram, but you know, the idea of that, where it's not complete until it's accepted or polished. If you only do that, you're really robbing yourself of the chance to explore and make mistakes. Like, look at all this is all mistakes. Look at this guy. I just thought, well, what if I make the very pushed and twisted and yeah, okay, so it didn't work well. I mean, he's got something, but it's not cohesive at all. But it's an experiment, and this guy too. Like, I like him better, but it's, again, it doesn't really I'm not like super attached to them. This one's obviously a failure. This hand doesn't at all match this head. But the only way you're gonna figure it out is by doing it. Here, this one's kind of working, so that's good. Hey, not bad. The arms, I feel like they're too defined in terms of musculature, especially because of how simplified this head is. So sadly, I never really liked noodle arms. You know, the arms that you might see in old Disney stuff with Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse or things like that. They just have sort of these hose arms. I never really liked that, but I do see how that probably is a much more appropriate simplification. When the head is this simplified, it's probably like the hands would, or the arms would get much more hosey, although they are more like that than I normally do. In this case, I did add a bit of musculature to it, but it would have to be handled very simply, and it still does kind of get hosey towards the hand, like very thin, like a rubber hose. But there is this, I don't know, resistance. Because, again, as I said, I didn't really like that look. I don't feel like I want to do that. And so it's like, I'd rather they have defined muscles. I like when the deltoid shows. I like when the tricep show. So it's like, yeah, but it's not gonna... And besides, if you look at a real person, their arms kind of do look more like a hose than a very bumpy thing. All right, so here, I guess this one was more about shading, because I'm adding a bit more shading to these things. You can see. And then here, I don't know, I kind of like the sleeve things. I don't know if they're real, but it looks like, I mean, it probably is. But just this cut where you've got like sleeves and then you've got it kind of cutting around here. I think it looks cool in my opinion. Right, so I guess here I'm just trying to do the shading but keep things a bit cleaner. And I figure it's because the water brush is so finicky. I haven't used it in a while for that reason. And then I just figure, well, can I do it with shading? And I think when I shade like this, where you kind of draw a line to separate the shadow and the light, it works a lot better than when there is no such line. So that's sort of the lesson, and it looks like I'm doing that consistently, where you kind of see, like, you outline the shadow shape and then you put in the shading. And what that also allows you to do is stuff like this, because if you, I mean, here's a bit of a mistake, but if you go over the shadow line where the form turns, because this is all skin, right? Let's say he was wearing a shirt and the shirt isn't seen here. I mean, here's a better example, because this person is wearing like some kind of clothing. If the line goes over this between the skin and the shirt, that's bad. But if the line goes from the skin into the rest of the skin, because it's still just the shadow of the skin, that's fine. It creates like a feathered look, which is completely fine. These faces, oh my, don't know what happened here. So I like this one's C shape. You can see this very clear shape in the head, and I think if you look very carefully, you can see there is an original drawing here. You can kind of see that simplified head shape goes around, goes straight into the neck, goes around down here, comes all the way into the arm. And so, I mean, all of that was built. It looks messy. It's pretty easy to clean up this stuff though, but it was originally this big shape. So if you want gesture, it's really important that you start with gesture. Start with something energetic if you want it to look energetic in the end. Here I'm trying to push this. But the thing is, it's got this very strong pull towards the back of the head here. And then this kind of isn't working. It's just like this. This one has a pull towards, I suppose, the eye? Or maybe above, maybe something here. Which, you know, you got two different rhythms which aren't really working together. So I don't think that's so good. And it's better to think of like as few rhythms as possible. especially if you want something to look forceful. You want everything, all the energy to be pulled in one direction, and then it'll look forceful. And if you've got things going off in different directions, I mean, that can look forceful if it's like an explosion, because then it all traces back to one point. But if it's just, there's no explosion, things are just randomly, well, energetic, but going in different directions, that tends to counter it. It starts to look weak and not that strong at all. Because if you imagine like a person and they're wearing loose-fitting clothing, maybe like a bunch of ribbon-like or scarf-like things, and they're all these long strips, and then you just have some of them blowing in one direction and in another direction and in another direction. If you looked at it, it would be like, well, this kind of looks random, and maybe there's a wind blowing, and maybe these are light, and it doesn't feel that energetic. It's just like, yeah, there's stuff going on, but it's kind of random. Whereas if they were all blowing in one direction, it's like, oh wow, the wind is really strong from this one direction, and it's making everything move in the opposite direction from where the wind is blowing, and then it's, oh, okay, so that's energetic, right? So that's something to keep in mind. This guy looks like he's got kind of a poo head. I don't know. It could be anything. It could be moss or I don't know. And these ones are, I started with this shape. I don't know what you call it, but it's a similar shape with this girl as well. Like this shape. That's how it's defined if you look it up. It's not a triangle or a square. It's woof. So you look for your woof, and then you find it and you stick to it because it's strong. I don't know what this bird, admiral, it looks like some kind of admiral or something, is doing, but he's being, and sure. Yeah, I wanted to push the body. I don't think it worked, but, you know, let's not focus on it too much. See, this is kind of, if I just stopped here and I looked at this, it feels discouraging, where it felt pretty encouraging a few pages back, where it's like, oh, I'm figuring stuff out. But you will notice, for instance, that the heads connect to the body. So I didn't carry over all the information of what I learned on the better days, but I took some of it. You can see here, like the heads are kind of, they've got more connection with the body. I mean, this one's pretty, it's almost good. I would say the head is kind of the problem here, but the connection to the body is okay. This one too. I mean, that looks okay. He's got this tiny head, big traps. The arms are kind of working. It's moving in the right direction. It might not be appealing. It might not be like a nice looking image, but you're not always going to have nice looking images, especially when you're just figuring stuff out. But the mileage you get from considering the important things is valuable. I really like this one. I think they're all from reference, or at least, okay, let's think about it. These two are definitely from reference. This one is definitely from reference. I mean, when I use reference, the shapes are different, but I really like these shapes. I think they work quite well. She's wearing a backpack thing, so it's not like her back is that skinny. The back is actually, I mean, you can see it. See, there's the original back going through. So yeah, good shapes, and that's something reference offers me, is just a chance to focus more on one thing, because I don't have to think about the anatomy or the perspective or anything, because the photo handles that. And I mean, when you're starting out, that's a big deal, because you still have to pay attention to all that. But once you've got more practice, it's like, okay, the photo's giving me a lot of information, so now I can focus more on like simplifying or exaggerating, or, you know, just stylizing things, which is good. Looks like this person was from reference, and I don't know who else was. This lady was from reference. I mean, like things like that, like the underwear and stuff, I wouldn't think of adding the details like that. And then it's like, yeah, why not? And this person's from reference. I guess I was thinking like, well, it's good to draw from reference. You get a lot of stuff. Here again, these, I don't know, I'm tempted to call them horse legs. They feel very powerful. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a nice proportion. The head doesn't quite match in this one anyway. But overall, you know, moving in the right direction, and it's a definite welcome change here. Played around with Kay again. She's a recurring. She'll come back over and over again. Just every once in a while, I revisit her, and I guess what I'm working on is these types of shapes, trying to put them in her and see how it works. And continuing on, here's like a 3 heads. This one really feels out of place. It doesn't quite work in the same style. Actually, all 3 of these don't have the same style, but I think the idea of it where you can kind of see the whole thing is built off this oval. And there's like an oval underneath, and then the eyes are all on this curve, and then the faces are all kind of facing different directions. So it creates this idea that there's a lot of energy and movement and things are dynamic, but it's built off a very simple thing. And I think that's a huge lesson, is things can look like they have a lot of variety, but in order to make them work, it's very helpful to build off actually something quite simple. Continuing on, we will be trying to hammer in these things, or I'll be trying to hammer in the things I'm learning and share with you my discoveries. And I really hope this is entertaining or educational, and I hope it helps, and thanks for watching.